Hello everyone and welcome to one of the final episodes of the third season of PhD the Philosophical Drama. I'm Shweta and today we are going to talk about one of the crucial but neglected aspects of the academic life. We are going to discuss about networking and community building. And to discuss that, we have with us Dr. Mohamed Abdelhack. He did his PhD from Kyoto University, Japan, and is currently working as a postdoc at the Krembil Center for Neuroinformatics in Canada. So let's call Mohamed over and discuss his journey of networking and community building.
Hello.
Hey, hi. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really glad that we are having this discussion. Welcome to our show.
And thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so I'll start with I'll start with your timeline with respect to your time in academia. So we'll start with your pre-PhD experience. So tell me about how you probably did your bachelor's in Egypt, right?
Yes.
How did you get interested in what you are currently doing? How did you get interested in neuroinformatics and computational neuroscience?
Yeah, so my story was quite a convolved one. So originally, I started actually my undergrad degree in petroleum and mining engineering.
Okay.
And that was for the first year. Then I hated it. Then I decided I don't want to keep doing this anymore. So I moved into electrical engineering. And yeah, I liked electrical engineering, but at the time I discovered this world of brain-computer interfacing, which was yeah, that's fascinating. The idea that you can just talk to a computer just using your brain signals, that was something that was out of science fiction for me. So I wanted to get into that field, and that was when I started actually the idea of international networking. So I was looking at almost no one really knew about this PCI thing back in Egypt. So I started contacting, I'm reading a paper and then I'm contacting whoever email is on that paper. It's hey, can you take me for an internship?
Oh, okay.
And yeah, there was I think after 20 or 30 emails, one of them said, yeah, okay. But we cannot pay you. And I'm yeah, that's fine. And I was but I need if you can help me with, accommodation, etc. And they were yeah, don't worry, you can come stay at my place. My children are already, graduated and they're off to their lives. So we have a lot of empty rooms, so you can come and stay in our place.
So this was not in Egypt. This was when you're saying that you made applications or you wrote to people, you wrote to people internationally.
Yeah. So that one was in the US.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was one of the big labs in that field actually. So I ended up going there, and it was actually a very stressful time just going there because getting the US visa, etc. And also at the time it was the Arab Spring in Egypt. Okay. So everything was just messed up.
Oh, okay.
From getting my exams on time while being able to travel after the exams. Yeah, but it ended up happening, and it was a very fruitful it was a very fruitful period. I understood a lot just about the idea of research, because as an undergrad in Egypt, we don't get this research opportunities. We're more you take a class, you do whatever, and then you take the exam, and then you pass, and that's it.
Right.
So the idea of just doing the research and coming up with the idea and writing up all of those things, I started learning when I was there. Yeah, and then I returned back, and during my time there, I was okay, what are the broken stuff that you have that I can take back and work on in Egypt? So all of the devices that they wanted to get rid of, I was okay, I'll just take that and, we'll repurpose it and, work with it back at home.
Wow, so you carried those things from the US to Egypt.
Yes. And they're all like just broken, like EEG caps, for example. We would disassemble them and then reconnect them to something else, because the problem when we also buy parts in Egypt is that mostly they're, in order to be cheap, they have to be low quality. So, it's better to get like even broken things that are higher quality originally and then repurpose them. Yeah, and then after that, I was applying, I wanted to get more into like the idea of like neuroscience. Like, yeah, okay, I now understand like just the idea of connecting the computer to the brain, but I want to understand what is the underlying structure and like how does the brain compute things so that we can improve that even more. So then I started applying for more like neuroscience programs, and I managed to get a scholarship for originally PhD in the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. And yeah, I stayed there, but also I did not like what I ended up doing as a research project, because it was like very experimental neuroscience, and I'm not good at it coming from engineering. And I wanted to do something that is more theoretical with a bit of mix of experimental. So I ended up like, okay, I'll cut short this at master's and then I'll start to move on.
Okay.
The interesting part is that while I was searching, okay, where am I going to go next, I actually returned back to what I was looking at when I was an undergrad, like all of those people that I've been contacting before.
Right.
And then one of them had at the time said, yeah, I can take you for postgrad, but you need to get funding. And at the time, there was no funding from like that. So that's when incidentally, he was also in Japan. So I just took a flight and went, it's like, hey, I want to visit your lab.
Okay.
And I took a flight and I went there. And we met and we talked a little bit. And then he said, yeah, we're also moving to Kyoto University. So you can also get your degree. You will be, starting our lab there, because he was in a different institute.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So connecting these things with our theme for today, what inspired you? Like, did you have any guidance, like people who you knew back in Egypt when you started making these applications and applying for various places? So, did you have any mentor, or did you have peers who helped you, or told you that you can actually do these things?
No, I was the one who's helping others, because I was the first one from my class to actually study abroad. Like, I graduated 2012. I left in 2012. And then after me, like the whole, like half of my class then went for postgrads abroad, and many of them were like, yeah, can you help us with this? But at the time, I think I have also the privilege of that both of my parents are also in academia. So you kind of grow up this mentality in your head. So, I mean, that was one of the privileges that I have over people who don't, like our first generation PhDs or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So you also had like collaborations when you were in the US for the first time, and you innovated things on your own. So how did the collaborations start? Like, was it like through your mentor, or again, did you contact people? How did you go around that?
So in general, the way I approach things is like, I'm very open. Like, I go to the place and it's like, hey, I want to meet everyone. So I just knock on someone's door. It's like, hey, I just joined. And the thing is, like, I expect other people to do that also. Like, if I'm the one who's sitting there and then other people come in, I also expect it, but not everyone does it. So yeah. And I end up doing it anyway, because I just like to, meet different people, and like, not even for the sake of collaboration as a science, but just to meet someone. Like, there's a lot of good people in the world. So, like, the more you meet, the more you will get to know people who are interesting in general, not necessarily as a scientist, but just as people.
Right. So, which means that you are a social person, and
in general, yeah.
So then, and again, you like discussing people's like science with them. Doesn't necessarily mean that you want to collaborate with them. But then, eventually, if you think that, this is, I think, how it happened, that if you think that there is something that you can work together on, so that's how you started collaborating with people.
Yeah, in general, when we are talking, for example, about hey, like the science or something, then you start coming up. Oh yeah, I was thinking about this similar idea and about that, and then they'd be like, if this moment of eureka comes in, where you're like, oh yeah, why don't we try?
Okay.
And sometimes people just read your work and they contact you. So for example, at the end of my PhD, so after we published our first paper, some people from the medical school said, hey, this looks interesting. We want to use it to discuss or to study schizophrenia. So they contacted my supervisor, and then we started in a collaboration we're still running up till now.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're using mainly the same methods that I've been using before during my PhD, but in a very different sense, that instead of just trying to understand the brain, we're trying to understand, okay, how do schizophrenia patients are different from healthy controls.
Okay. So that's the collaboration with psychiatrists that you had.
Yeah, in Japan.
Yeah, at the end. So again, during how was your PhD experience per se? Because it's again a different country from where you were brought up. So how did that transition work for you? I mean, I know you stayed in Japan for a bit before that, but then PhD.
No, I didn't stay in Japan before. I mean, during masters, but that was also originally a PhD.
Okay.
So, it was not easy. I think the good thing about how I approached it is that I didn't put any expectations, because a lot of people go to Japan and they're like, yeah, Japan is this different planet. Everyone is polite and, everything is punctual, etc. And it's not like that in reality. Not everywhere, not every, there's always exceptions to something. And then, there's a lot of people who get cultural shocks when they arrive in Japan. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think my main cultural shock was the idea of actually being social. That was the part because in general, the people there are very reserved. Mm-hmm. So they would not this idea, this way of being overly social with people does not bode well with them. And this is when I was I think I spent a year or something saying good morning to some person until they responded. It's wow. For a year they did not say anything, and then at the end they're like, oh, good morning.
But that's good. I mean, it worked after 8 years.
Yeah, and also I learned how to kind of read the person in front of you, whether they are whether it's okay to be overly social with them or to just keep your limits, because not everyone is as social as I am.
Right. Also, I think there cultures are different. If you compare just US and Europe, the cultures are very drastically different. And
yes.
Like you just said that. Talking to people can be intimidating to some people sometimes because they are not used to these kind of So, how did you, let's say as a first year in Japan, how did you deal with these things? Did you have a community of your own or a group of your own? How did that work for you?
Yeah, so in the first couple of years where I was doing the master's, we were lucky because all of the students came together, all of the batch of the students. So basically almost all of us were not from Japan or not from Okinawa especially. Maybe there's one person from Okinawa. And it's kind of we're all this blind people who are navigating the space around us. And this kind of creates this bond. It's we have to stick together. We're all the ignorant people who are navigating this space together. So those are actually, these, you make best friends this way. because you're having like, you're facing the same challenges, and yeah, you're kind of learning how to live your life in this new place. So, and we do understand, like, when someone starts complaining, it's like, yeah, I'm feeling very lonely. And yeah, we are able to give each other company because kind of like we're all feeling the same loneliness. And the same thing when I went to Kyoto also, like, at the time there was like this scholarship of African students that they brought, like many African students every year when I moved. And they created this association of Africans in Kyoto. And basically they would do like those gatherings, and that's how we basically also, like, many people were also finding it very difficult because most of African countries are very social type. Like, people in general are very social. So they always have this problem of like their workplace people are not as talkative as they're used to. So we go together and it's like, it's kind of like, there's the African group, for example, there was the Egyptian group, I went to the Arab group, and it's kind of like it's a meetup for friends, but at the same time, you can think of it as a therapy session.
Right, yeah. That's quite helpful a lot of times, especially in a very different country where people are also not speaking in a language which you do not really know. I mean, I don't know if you knew Japanese at that time, or like you spoke the language that the local people spoke over there. But I have heard that like a lot of people have this problem because of the language barriers. Communicating is even more difficult. And at this time, if you have someone like from your own community who understands you and you kind of resonate with that person, then I think it's great. Yeah, that's how, like, if you suffer together, you become best friends.
Yeah, and definitely like the idea of language barrier was like a big issue. Like, I was one of the people who tried to learn the language, and mostly just by getting into groups of people who don't speak any English. So yeah, I was able to speak generally well, but like not in the beginning, of course, like I was suffering. But it also creates a lot of funny situations, like, because also I was able to speak, but I'm not able to read and write. So, if you give me a text, I would not be able to read it. If someone else reads it to me, I would be able to understand it. Because of how the writing system there is very similar to Chinese.
Right. Okay. So, how was it with your PhD mentor then? Like, did your PhD mentor have any role? Like, a lot of times I've seen over here that PhD mentors take care that if it's an international student, then there's one more, level of difficulty, which is like adjusting with theme or scenario. So did your PhD mentor or any mentor that you had over there, did they help you out with that? Like, was there any connection with respect to those things?
So for a Japanese lab, I would say, yeah, my PhD mentor was very helpful. But in the end, there's also a limit to what can be done, because there is, for example, those summer students or undergrad students who are doing their thesis research, or master students. It's like they are Japanese and they don't speak English, or they speak very little, and because people are very shy to make any mistakes, so they try not to speak English. But at the same time, I was also able to, speak decent Japanese at the time, so I was able to deal with them. Yeah, but mainly my supervisor was he was like a very big shot, so he's really busy, so it's usually most of the help that I'm getting is from the assistant professor under him, and also like the postdocs and other students around me. Yeah, and basically, I was also like one of the first, I was the first student, literally, and so it was my supervisor and the assistant professor with him, and me. So it was mostly me and the assistant professor who would, get most of the help, and of course the research admin as well was really helpful. In Okinawa, they had a whole dedicated student support system that, they would even take you to, finish your official papers.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But that actually was something that was really annoying to me because, okay, if you're going to hold my hand at every step, once I leave you, I will not be able to do anything by myself.
Yeah.
So that's why I in the beginning I used it, but then I was like, okay, I'll just navigate things, I'll make mistakes and it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then that actually what helped me a lot when I moved to Kyoto, because now I'm able to talk to people, I'm able to, navigate, cutting corners, how to know, like, because everyone thinks like, yeah, Japan goes by the rules. No, Japan doesn't go by the rules. If you know how to cut the corners, you would able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really helpful for me that I decided to do this. Yeah, and then also when new international students came in, I was kind of like this intermediate person in the middle as well. So, like they would be the ultimate guide of like what should you do, but I'd also be like, yeah, that's like how to navigate it as an international person.
Right. Yeah, it's great if you like have a resource or someone who's resourceful in such scenarios. Talking about academic or work related, networking or collaborations or connections. How did you develop those during your PhD? Now that you're describing that there was a different culture and you were kind of used to a more open and social culture, how did the work collaborations work in like during your PhD?
So I would have to say that during PhD, the collaborations were very limited, and it's mainly because of time differences and also, the different culture of collaboration. So the way a collaboration happens in Japan between two Japanese labs is that, if I want to collaborate with one person in a different place, I don't go and talk to them directly. Okay. I go talk to my supervisor, and then their supervisors goes to talk to their supervisor. Mm-hmm. And then once those two parties agree, then the other supervisor talks to their trainee. Okay. And then you hold a big meeting with everyone, and that's how it starts. And then you can talk to the person directly. And so that's basically the etiquette of collaboration in Japan. So at the time I had I attended some conferences, so I had talked to some people, but it was not easy to do collaborations. And I think also US, Europe holds very few collaborations with like East Asia. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up deciding, I cannot stay in Japan anymore. Okay. As one of the scientific reasons.
Okay.
Yeah, so after that, it changed, of course.
Okay, so it's like a very formal thing which happens, if at all it happens. Okay, so like talking about, because you also brought up conferences. Did you attend like international conferences, as in conferences outside Japan? And if you did, then like could you build like a network of people or connections with them and something like that?
Yeah, so I attended like maybe 2 or 3 international conferences. Mm-hmm. But the thing I would say that helped me build the most networks was summer schools.
Okay.
So I attended like 2 summer schools. One of them was in Japan and one of them was in China. Mm-hmm. But both of them were like gathering people from all over the world. Okay. And until now, I have like networked with almost everyone from those summer schools. When I started organizing some events, I would invite them to come speak, and they would invite me to other events, and that's how things are going so far.
That's wonderful. So when you shifted to US again, like for your postdoc, for your first postdoc, what did you feel like? Did you feel liberated? Did you feel like it's like this is where I should be, or like, how was that transition for you?
Okay, so the first impression when I was in the US, I was like reading my home contract, and I was like, oh, I can understand that. Actually, I don't need someone to help me read it.
Seriously?
Yeah, because everything in Japan is written in Japanese, so I couldn't read like my home contract. I couldn't read any health insurance, etc.
Okay.
All of those things are written. And if there's an English text, there's usually a lot of mistakes in how the English is written, and it's also not legally binding. So you're basically putting yourself into a lot of trouble if you depend on it only. So that was my first impression. The US, it was easier to just, it's not easy to feel alone. Also, I was in St. Louis, which is not a big city. So you have this thing that, if you're just walking in the street saying hello to strangers, Americans are very social. So they'd be like, hi, and smiling at you. And, you just hold a random chat with a random person and they would be like going, even if they don't understand anything that you're talking about, they will have to keep the conversation going. So it felt like much easier, and also it's much more international. So I could find, for example, food that I'm more used to than in Japan, and buy them from just a nearby grocery store versus having to go like miles to find this international store. So it was much easier to live. The parts that I missed from Japan at this time was like cleanliness of the streets and public transportation. Like Japan public transportation is just excellent. US is just too car centric, which I don't like driving. So and also especially when you're in a small town, it's even harder. But the university at the time was also very helpful. Like, they give you a free pass for all of the public transportation, so you don't really have to do much. Like, you don't have to pay a lot on public transportation if you don't decide to have a car.
Were you saying something? I'm sorry.
No. I can continue about because then COVID happened, so that's a whole different story.
I'm going to talk about that. But okay, let's talk about that, because you are already talking about your postdoc in the US. And so what happened when COVID struck?
So I joined in 2019 in November. So I had 4 months of being able to meet people. And then COVID happened, and then everything started shutting down. And luckily, there was also another postdoc that joined the lab at the time, and basically, it's also the same story of us being the people who just arrived, so we're navigating life there together. And the good thing about it is, of course, so we became best friends, but also it's the part that I was missing, because I was working also in AI, so I was not working in neuro anymore at the time. So I was trying to also get in contact more with the neuro people, and I couldn't do that in my home university because everyone is working from home at the time. But that's when it actually opened a lot of opportunities. So because all of the summer schools that were supposed to happen in summer of 2020 ended up getting canceled. So what happened is that the people who were organizing those summer schools, they got together and said, okay, we need to figure something out. So why not make an international summer school that is online? And that's, so of course, because I attended, one of the organizers of one of the summer schools that I attended, invited all of my cohort to become teaching assistants in that summer school. And then I got in, and this is when, very heavy networking started to happen. Basically, we started, so it was a really huge thing, 2,000 participants from all over the world. And you're having small groups. Each TA is assigned to a group of around 10 students. And they wanted to make this as open as possible to everyone. So they also said, if you can speak another language, just tell us, so that if students are not very comfortable with English, they would be able to discuss in their own language. So I got in, it's okay, I don't know, there are Arabs in computational neuroscience, so let's try and see if we can meet people. So I got assigned into one of the Arab groups, which meant I have to wake up at 3 a.m. because most of them are in Europe and in the Middle East. But it was a really fun experience just to meet people who I can relate to, who are in the field. And that's actually how we started an organization, a whole organization called Arabs in Neuroscience. So it started with like, there were my group and there was another group that also spoke Arabic at the time. And we started, okay, let's make a meetup for Arabic speakers. So we had this Zoom meeting in the weekend, and we got to know each other. And it's like, okay, how about we create a Slack space and meet once a month, and everyone explains, you know, their research. So that's how we started. And then like it was, you know, like on off, you know, people are also busy with their lives, but then like years later, we actually like started formalizing it, and we now even organize the whole online summer course to help people from the Arab-speaking world get into computational neuroscience, because that field does not exist formally in any university.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So these students, they are basically, you're saying that are they PhD students or they are undergrads, or it's like a
there's all of the spectrum exists.
Okay. That's very
But at the same time, also got to meet all of the other teaching assistants, because we used to hold this like a pre-tutorial huddle where every TA who has a question about the tutorials that they're going to be teaching, we can ask each other and then we discuss it. Right. So yeah, and you know, like there's always those regular people who are always there.
Yeah.
And you kind of like, you create a bond. Like, you're the person that I'm meeting every day. Yeah. And some of them I haven't met yet in person. And some of them I started meeting after. And some of them were actually my classmates from the previous summer schools as well. So it was like, oh yeah, how have you been doing all of those years? And also, then I got into the organizing part of the summer school. So that when we got also to meet like a different bunch of people. And yeah, also when you're working closely with someone, like, you know, I actually met like one of like the best friends that I made during the summer school or during the organizing part. And then I met her, like, I just went to her city because she lives like 4 hours away.
Okay.
And it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like I'm meeting you in person for the first time, because, you know, you just feel, you know, there are those people who you even like you meet virtually, doesn't really matter. You kind of feel instantly that you know this person for a really long time.
Yeah. That's great. That's amazing. There's something else also that you are a part of, right? Neuromatch Academy. So
yeah, that's Neuromatch. That's one.
Okay, so you found like the Arab
community through Neuromatch. Exactly.
Okay. So
so Neuromatch was the one where, like, you know, all of the people from other summer schools gathered to create as a response to COVID pandemic.
Okay.
And it just finished actually this last week for the third year.
Okay. So it's in its third year now. The Neuromatch Academy is in its third year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I think like for these kind of things, I guess COVID was like a blessing in disguise. I don't know, because of that, like a lot of people globally. And
exactly, yeah. I keep telling people, like, you know, people always complain about COVID, and like, yeah, no, but think about like the good things that it opened, you know, like people like in the Middle East or like, you know, in many African countries who have never heard of like something like, you know, computational neuroscience, because I was in outreach during last year, not this year, but last year. So basically my idea or like my task was to increase the number of like countries that are represented in Neuromatch as much as possible. Like, you know, like how to reach those people who've never heard of something like that. And I remember I had a meeting with like a group of students and also professionals from Madagascar. And then once I was basically giving them a lecture about what computational neuroscience actually is. And it'd be like, oh, that actually exists. That sounds interesting. And many of them were like in AI or deep learning. And he's like, yeah, oh, so we can actually use deep learning to understand the human brain. That's interesting. And many of them got excited, and we actually got like 7 applicants from there.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, and also I remember we also got like so first year the number of represented countries was around like 70. It was like second year was like 116.
It's amazing. I mean, yeah. I think that connecting throughout the world connections throughout the world have actually gone really, really up exponentially when Zoom came in, and like it changed the picture completely. And I mean, now I guess these connections are still going to stay. So that's like a good thing which comes out of this. Um,
Yeah, and I like in-person interactions. You know, I prefer in-person interactions to online. But you know, if this is something that I cannot do in person, then
yeah,
you know, it's good that I'm able to do it at all.
right. Also, I think one of the aspects of like the difference between a person who works in a wet lab system versus a person who works in a computational system is that that person, the person who works on computational, does not really have more exposure of talking to a lot of people. Like if you consider a day in the life of like these two kind of researchers, then people in wet
Mhm.
lab are like roaming around in the lab talking to others. That kind of freedom is not there for the computational person. So building these connections and networks, I mean, I know that you are a social person and you can like try and go into any other lab and talk to people, but let's say there's an introvert who's
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's very, very difficult for these people to form their community, even find their community. So I think like having an online exposure to these things has actually made it easier for a lot more people than what it used to be.
Yeah. And it's still not perfect because of course internet quality is not as good in different places, but it is a huge improvement for most of the people. And yeah, if you're an introvert who is in computational field, yeah, it's not easy to be able to talk to people. So there's actually one of the reasons why, like at least now where I am, so Casey and I, where I'm working currently, so they have this like open office space. So basically there is no, different rooms for different labs, but like everyone is just like can see each other. And then there's like a central kitchen space where everyone comes and meets and chats in. So yeah, that actually makes interaction much easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so even like at least when also COVID was happening, so not many people were even coming in person. And then, but like there's like people who like I joined like in May of last year. And I was like, I cannot do like this completely online because I'll just end up like cooking stuff instead of working when my kitchen is just nearby. So I decided, I'll have to be going every day. And there were people who are regular, so you kind of like, okay, you're going to meet like this 1, 2, 3 people, and that became like like the first family. And incidentally, none of them were from my research group. All of them were from other research groups. But then when people started coming over more and more, it's becoming much more fun. Like, I like this being able to waste your time from doing research and just chatting to people about random stuff.
That's good too. Okay, so my final question to you: do you have like an advice or any comments that you would like to make based on like networking and forming communities? What would your thoughts be on that?
So my advice, and I think that's even an advice to myself, would be don't be shy to, just reach out to a person, like cold emailing them, and don't be annoyed when they don't respond, because, there's, especially in North America, that's something very common, where people just receive a lot of emails and it's really hard to see everything. And sometimes, you read an email and then, I'm going to respond to this a little bit later, and then you forget about it. So yeah, it's fine to keep, asking them. And also, like, after a while, if you don't get a response, just don't get offended that they've never responded to you. That's something I'm still struggling with, because, like, for me, I do not respond to my emails still. But I mean, I'm still a postdoc, so I don't know if I end up becoming like an assistant professor or something. How am I going to be doing with that? Because everyone says, like, yeah, it's probably not gonna happen. You're gonna get many more emails exponentially.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, let's see how it goes. But yeah, so main idea is, like, if you find someone, like, you're interested in their work, or if you're in workplace or in a conference and you just want to reach out to people, it's try to, break that shyness barrier of, like, just randomly talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're probably also trying to break the shyness barrier of talking to you anyway.
Yeah, I get it. Yes. All right.
It just takes one person to do it first.
Definitely. I think you are one of the standing examples of, building something, because when you said that you were the first person to come out, like, of Egypt and come into an international place, and then that's where after which you helped your batchmates and your friends who could also explore international locations for education. Because I think that's really great and commendable.
Yeah, so here's the rule. It's kind of like, think about it that it's a cycle. So, you get help from someone, and then you help more people, and then they are going to help more people, and then, it will turn around and come back to you again. So it's kind of like, just keep the circle of, being helpful, or, just doing the good cycle rather, because there's a lot of bad cycles that also end up happening. So try to stop those and, start a good cycle. And yeah, you will benefit from it even if you don't know how it did.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mohamed. I had a wonderful time today, and thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great for me too.
Yeah. All right.
See you.
So if you exit the
okay, from up.
Yeah.
Okay. See ya.
Bye. I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. We'll be back in our next episode, which is going to be our final episode for this season, and it's going to be another interesting topic. So stay tuned and take care.